Welcome to Civic Pulse. Civic means society, and the Civic Pulse looks at what's going on between our families, our neighbors, and our government. Every month, we connect with diverse influencers, change makers, and leaders. These are conversations at the intersections across America. I'm Dr. Dilara Saeed, and I'm honored to serve as the host of the Civic Pulse podcast. Let's go. Today we're joined by Shifa Safadi. Shifa is an author of children's books. And the last time we met at Civic Pulse podcast, I had on here an educator who worked at the federal level and who helped us understand how the federal government and funding and challenges served our children at school. Today, Shifa is going to talk about in classrooms, in schools, and as an educator writing books, how we impact children's lives as they become young adults and move into society. Shifa, welcome to Civic Pulse.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about your teaching career, because you said you started this through the frame of being a elementary school teacher, a junior high school teacher.
A middle school teacher.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So, I've always loved books and literature. I took English literature in college, and education was just a natural extension of that. I have four kids, so I'm a mother, and once they started growing, I saw the need for educating and for teachers, and especially Muslim teachers, and Muslim teachers who understand English education as well, because, growing up as a Muslim American myself, I feel like I was so often caught between my Syrian life and my American life that, I understand now because I remember how important it was to see my identity. I mean, anytime there was a hijabi Muslim woman in any public space, whether that be education or even on the news or anything, I was just I found myself and felt so seen. And so I wanted to offer that to children too and show them, what strength looks like, what education looks like, and hopefully inspire our young kids. So I did teach English middle school language arts for a few years. But, at the same time, I was working on my own writing because like I said, I love literature, and teaching kids did offer me a little bit of the background of, kids and what they like. I feel like I learned a lot about how audiobooks are important. I am a primarily print book reader myself. But I taught a few English as a second language kids, and I just saw firsthand how important audiobooks were for pronunciation. I think especially kids of immigrants. I grew up mispronouncing everything. So, just a simple way in how like interacting with kids really kind of helped me in pursuing my writing career. And of course, the inspiration of seeing children, other than my children, seeing their interactions, seeing what their interests are. And that just kind of helped me along. And alhamdulillah, with now writing books both for middle schoolers and elementary kids.
That's powerful. What you said resonated with me, but I think also it would resonate with so many of us. The first thing you talked about is wanting to understand how students learn, how children grow and experience their world. And you thought teaching would be that. And how many parents have thought about that, right? Like, how do they connect with their students? How do they connect with the children that they have at home? And how can they teach their own children, right? Along with the teachers that are teaching them at school. The second thing you talked about was going into teaching because you thought then you could learn your craft, whatever that craft may be later on in life, as you found out it's going to be authoring. For me as well, you taught middle school English. I taught middle school, junior high, we called it junior high U.S. history. And it was because I wanted to learn U.S. history. I wanted to understand it. And then it laid the foundation for my work here in civic and racial justice. I would love to hear a little bit about the characters you chose when you were telling your stories, when you decided to begin telling your stories. So who is Kareem between and who is Amina Banana?
I love how you're talking about educating hand in hand with stories, because I think even for those of us who aren't educators, even for listeners who maybe are parents and they kind of want to think about the role of educating their kids and how to boost that role. And one of my biggest advice to parents was to read with their kids, right? And that's kind of the center of my writing is I'm really thinking of serving the Muslim Ummah. I'm thinking of serving Muslim kids. So whether it's Kareem or Amina, and I'll get a little bit more into them, but both of them were born from my feelings growing up as a Muslim American and wanting to fill the gaps that I felt. Specifically with Kareem Between, Kareem is a young middle school boy, and all he wants is to make his football team. But he is alive during 2017, 2018, when Trump's first presidency was. And at that time, there was the Muslim ban. Now, when the Muslim ban happens, Kareem's mother is in Syria trying to bring her parents to America to get treatment, and they have a green card. She doesn't have a citizenship. So the book explores how his mother gets stuck because right when the Muslim ban was first signed, it did apply to green card holders. Lots of people had their green cards taken away, and she wasn't able to come back. And at the same time, he's struggling at middle school with being fully proud of his Muslim identity. So he kind of allows other children to call him K instead of Kareem. He hides his Syrian food. He kind of hides his Arabic. He hides those parts of himself. And he kind of just wants to fit in, just wants to, his mother works with Syrian refugees. She had asked him to help out a Syrian refugee at school, and he kind of distances himself from him. He doesn't, take that proactive step towards helping him. And I've had readers that mention to me, Kareem makes a lot of mistakes.
Mm.
And I tell them, yes, he does make mistakes. And I wanted to show what it was like because it's a very authentic experience for kids to just want to fit in, right? That's why football is such a big part of the book too, because, seeing my own kids, seeing my students, their biggest thing in life happens to be the bear season. And if, who's going to win the football team at that moment in time, kids don't often think about politics. But oftentimes for kids who are BIPOC, for kids who are Muslim American, they have no option but to be
Mm.
thrust into politics because you are forced into that through your
Mm.
experiences, right? I mean, Kareem doesn't choose it, it chooses him, and he has to learn how to handle that. So
Mm.
I try to, through the story, show the reader what it's like for a young kid who is a football fan, but deals with the very real reality of what many Muslim Americans dealt with back then and now as well, and how he finds his confidence to stand up for justice, to stand up and use his First Amendment rights and be a proud Muslim American. Hopefully in modeling that for kids, if they're going through the same thing, they'll find that, mirror a lesson for them. And maybe even for kids who aren't Muslim who read it, they'll kind of understand a little bit more of what it's like to be Muslim American and to
Mm.
kind of grapple with that. And for Amina Banana, it's a story about a Syrian refugee. So it kind of
Mm-hmm.
delves into the same topics, but from the perspective of someone who's new and how, learning English is difficult and kind of tries to teach compassion. And it's at a younger level. So it kind of delves into those same themes of belonging and identity.
I appreciate your saying that you write stories because you want to help serve Muslim families and help Muslim children.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to push a little on that because I'm thinking your story is good for all children. I'm thinking the
Absolutely.
stories that I've read that are
100%.
yours would be wonderful for an Italian American family to read at bedtime, for a
Absolutely.
Native American family to read at bedtime.
100%.
And when I have spoken with communities of color of different backgrounds or communities that at one point or another in their historical arc through American history have felt marginalization, your stories resonate completely with their stories.
Absolutely.
So
I
how,
had
yeah.
when I sorry for interrupting you, but when I went to the National Book Awards
Yeah,
last year at this time, I met with a lot of students in New York, and I had an Asian American child who came up to me and he told me,
yeah,
I'm not Syrian, I'm not Muslim, but Kareem is my favorite book, Kareem Between, because I related as an Asian American. I very much know what it's like to be stuck between these two worlds.
yeah.
So absolutely. I mean, it is the root of kind of where I write from as my own identity, but absolutely, I think the story will resonate and does resonate with many kids of many different backgrounds.
And I think when we write authentically from our experience, we realize our
Yeah,
experience resonates with so many others. And so I would love to see in the future and think about
yeah,
how your books could be, in classrooms across the nation,
yes,
public schools, private schools, faith-based schools. It doesn't really matter. Children and
absolutely.
teachers and parents should be reading these books. So today, when you're talking about belonging, and you're talking about finding our space with our identity as being fully American and fully whatever faith we may follow and whatever ethnic background we may be from, you could be writing to young adults who are struggling with their First Amendment
Hmm.
rights being respected. You could be writing for young adults who are moving into careers and not sure at work how they should show up. You chose children's books. What do you think is out there for young adults? And do you ever think of writing books for that? Or are there recommendations you have for people who are writing for young adults?
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many Muslim authors out there that are really, writing about topics that are, so close to our community. And, I just kind of stepped forward and followed their footsteps. Some of my recommendations include Huda Fahmi's series. There's the Huda FRU. That book, the first book in that graphic novel series, deals with how it feels to be a Muslim American in Dearborn, of all places, and how, it's very much based on the author's own life as well. And the whole series is absolutely fantastic. There is Reem Shuqairi, who writes young adult fiction as well. And she wrote a recent book called Six Truths and a Lie. And it's a very powerful sort of thriller book. And it deals with a group of Muslim teens who are accused of actually like committing a crime, and it delves into kind of racism and
Mm,
Islamophobia and how that affects real young kids who are also just living their lives. And it was such a powerful book. I mean, SK Ali has a lot of really great young adult novels as well. I think like, in my own life when I read, I find so much meaning in stories in general. I think books offer us connection. So I think for sure when you're Muslim and you read a Muslim story, there's a certain type of connection that's just absolutely profound. But I think reading in general, at the root of reading is humanity, right? When I craft a story, I often start with crafting a character. And this character will have an internal arc, which is sort of like a lesson or theme that they have to learn about themselves. And so within all the root of reading and the root of stories is humanity, is kind of like a want to connect and to be empowered. So
mm,
honestly, even for stories that might be fantasy, right? Like S.K. Ali recently wrote a dystopian novel. And, I wouldn't say there's a Muslim character in it. It has a little bit of sort of Islamic kind of like mythology in it and stuff. But honestly, in that book, it's just a story about a group of young people who are resisting a regime that is determined to wipe out the records. And, reading that even, it kind of
mm,
reflects the importance of stories, the importance of telling our own stories.
mhm,
So I just think in general, reading and books are just such a powerful way to be inspired, to, be more articulate, to learn critical thinking, even in media consumption, right? I would teach my young students all about being able to read the news articles
mm,
and realize where there's passive language versus active language, being able to, discern with propaganda and what is bias, internal bias, all these things, just a byproduct of reading anything really.
mhm,
So, I just often just encourage kids like and parents and educators to encourage young people to just read and
Hmm.
see what resonates with them. And often, just as something that happens as a byproduct, is them getting more literate, which benefits everybody.
I think about three junior high, high school books that I think I've read, and I give these three examples of many, many between many others that we've read, but that give you three very different experiences, but each teach you the authentic story of the person who is the character, also teaches you the history and the politics of the time,
Hmm.
and then it again resonates with cultures beyond their culture, right? The first one is a friend of mine, Alia Hussein, wrote
Hmm.
Neither Here Nor There. And that
Hmm.
was her, growing up in 70s, 80s, trying to understand where she fit in, not as an Asian, not as an American, not as a person of faith. Like, how did it all fit, right? Second
Hmm.
one was actually set in Korea. I remember reading When My Name Was Kyoko, of the
Hmm.
Japanese occupation of Korea. And
Hmm.
most of us don't even understand some of this world
No,
history, even recent world history from the last 100 years. But books give us an opportunity to understand
absolutely.
history through a story, and it could actually be fiction or nonfiction.
Yeah,
And then the third
100%.
one is when the Watsons go to Birmingham, 1952, which is the story of a black family in 1952 going to Birmingham, Alabama. And it happens to be when the church is bombed and beautiful young girls die in the church bombing. But it's woven in this story that that isn't about domestic terrorism or white supremacy. It's about a black family living in Detroit, going to
Yeah.
visit relatives. So you see the beauty of the family, the humor in just being a regular
Hmm.
family, and then this tragic occurrence on their trip. And so I think all these stories are
Hmm.
sharing who we are from different cultures, and we all benefit from reading
Absolutely.
from them. What's changed in the world today, um, in storytelling and in writing? Uh, how do you cut through the noise of all this literature, all these short proses, Instagram, other ways that people get their news that is not the typical ways that they may get it? And certainly reading has come under attack and in these under threat in this time as
Hmm.
well. What's changed and how do you get through it? Or are you finding something is growing in terms of people are reading more?
Yeah.
I might be,
I mean, it's so hard to kind of pinpoint. I mean, there's no doubt that literacy is down across the border in America. And even when I taught, my middle school students, I did notice like COVID had a very real effect on a lot of students. Being at home, did kind of get them used to devices. And, as we know, like with devices, it's not the same as in-person learning for many of the young people, especially those who benefit from, peer interaction. So, I think there is no doubt like changing in how young people learn. And, the kind of the increase of like devices is just like a reality. But I think it's very important for us to like be proactive about it. So, with my own children, I kind of try to meet them where they are, and see what their interests are in terms of literacy and reading. So my oldest is a 14-year-old and he loves fantasy. So, I will, get him all the fantasy books that are out there and see what he likes. And we have discussions about them and he, lets me know what he likes, what he doesn't like. Sometimes it'll be books I read. Sometimes it'll be, stories that I haven't. And he'll just tell me, hey, this and this happened. And I'll just be excited that he's, enjoying reading. And we'll discuss, even sometimes he'll tell me, we discussed Divergent at school and he learned, about dystopian
mm,
literature and how it mirrors a lot of what's, happening today in the world, right? We discussed the Hunger Games and a lot about, what the Hunger Games symbolizes and the media and the entertainment. So there's so much, and I think it just is like discussing, even if it seems like some books maybe are just entertainment, but there's so much we can
yeah.
gain from. And then my middle child, she's 11. She doesn't like fantasy at all. She is very much about contemporary and in particular graphic novels. So I also, will try to meet her where she is. She dabbled a little bit with audiobooks. So I was like, okay, let's download some audiobooks and see what you think, And with the younger ones, I do still read them picture books, try to, also have discussions with them about, whatever they're reading. And I think it's really, kids are different. They're obviously exposed to social media and this fast kind of culture. Even as an author, I can
Mhm.
tell you that authors and publishers are changing the way
Mhm.
that we write, right? So you'll find that middle grade books, which is my particular genre that I write, are shorter. The chapters are shorter. Kerim Between is a novel in verse.
Mhm.
So it's written in verse, which is very much easier. I often describe verse as sort of a TikTok thread because you kind of feel like each verse tells a story.
Yeah.
So kids feel fulfilled because they're changing so fast and the plot is faster. Graphic novels offer a little bit. So I think trying to, meet kids where they are, trying to help bridge the gap, knowing that literacy is definitely impacted, trying to connect with them more, viewing reading as fun as well. It's not a chore. Of course, there's benefits to it educationally, but it also is fun. It's
Mm.
entertaining. It can be something relaxing for them. So kind of trying to, go to the library more, making sure that they have lots of options to choose from. I mean, many people don't know that just the presence of books in the home, just the presence of books is correlated with children having higher education, whether literacy or math or computers. Everything goes up just by having books on hand. So,
Mhm.
just, being able to kind of provide that for our young people
Mhm.
will really hopefully help them with and hopefully tackle the literacy crisis a little
Yeah.
bit more.
And for younger children, reading increases vocabulary,
Yes,
increases number of
absolutely.
words. If you're entering kindergarten with
Yes,
3,000 to 5,000 words in your vocabulary, it completely shifts your trajectory in the early years, which then continues in the
100%.
years throughout. So what I'm hearing from you is like language evolves, reading and what we identify as reading evolves. Reading when you are
Absolutely.
3 years old could be looking at the pictures and drawings
Yeah.
and making up the story as you go along,
Yes,
seeing the letters but not knowing
100%.
at all what they mean. In
Yes.
elementary and junior high, it could be you're reading, but you're reading through a graphic novel, you're reading through
Yes.
a verse, as you wrote for Kareem Between, or you could be reading To Kill a Mockingbird again by Harper Lee or a
Yes.
Ray Bradbury
Absolutely.
novel. And that can also be great reading, right? And so when we stop putting a boundary around this is what it means to read, you
Yes.
must read of this genre, you must read of this
Yes.
caliber, this vocabulary level, and you just simply allow people to enjoy language and
Absolutely.
speak language. I think we're
Yes.
making that shift, and I hope just keep putting good books in front of our kids.
Yeah.
So, what worries you? Um, we talked about the hope and the reading and so many opportunities still to learn and read and speak. What worries you for our children and language and the world we live
I mean, a lot.
in?
A lot worries me for sure. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think that like, having four children of such different ages and then
Mm,
being a teacher just taught me that the expectations of like having high expectations or having certain expectations, no matter what they are for children, is actually counterintuitive. So I try not to worry about where I want them to be at. For my children, I've realized that, there are times that they are going to not even want to read. There are times where, they're going to be wanting just a break, and sometimes they're going to just want to reread the same book over and over. It's so hard to have a certain expectation, like to, set them up, and even sometimes I've seen like parents who have come to me and said, I really want my kid to read. So I told him that I'm not going to give him his devices at all until he reads a whole book. And sometimes that does worry me as well, because associating reading as a punishment.
mm.
or trying to get kids to catch up, right? Like there is such a literacy gap that expecting kids to start reading like 5 hours a day to catch up, I think is also something that isn't going to
Mm,
work. So what worries me is maybe like pushing too much, actually. I think like what I want to see, and often what makes a difference with kids is just offering them, it's literally 20 minutes a day. It's meeting them where they're at, having empathy towards the fact that, the world really is difficult. I mean, I feel anxiety about the world on a daily basis. I can't imagine a young person having, and being expected to
wow.
be so much. So I don't want to push children away by having such high expectations. I think, just allowing children to kind of, you know,
Mm,
hopefully like slowly find their way. And maybe even that means just reading together, even if, that is something that I feel like the world is so fast paced, just having those 20 minutes where the family maybe sits down, reads a book.
yeah.
Yeah, that might be the difference. That might
Mm.
be the connecting point.
My next question was going to be, through this worry, what gives you hope? But I think you answered it, and I love your answer. It was be merciful with our children, be
Yeah,
compassionate
absolutely.
with our children, with our young adults who are going through a
Yes.
very
Yeah,
fast, evolving, and changing world. And if we are, as you said, anxious about
absolutely.
what's going to happen tomorrow, can you imagine what young people are feeling? Um, I would also say, like, there are tools and ways of coping with the world that they have that inspire me, that
Absolutely.
give me hope. Like, wow, I could learn from someone who's much, much younger than me how to cope through this
Yes.
crazy world. When I'm anxious, they're like taking it in. It's not
Yeah,
to say that there aren't challenges and they are absolutely struggling with them, but I think it's also to say we need to look at them for some of the ways to walk through life a little bit
agreed.
more with lighter foot and a lighter heart.
Yes.
And to your thought about just read few minutes, what I think about the immersion, like in our faith, we talk about exposing children and just opening the Quran early in life. I
Yes.
know Christian families would do that with the Bible. Hindu families do that with their holy and scripture, and so I think it's so important. Jewish families do this with the Torah. The idea of like faith scripture early and in a welcoming way, and then early reading and books
Hmm.
in a welcoming and in a nurturing way. And then, of course, throughout life, being exposed to words, letters, numbers, thinking about it, and making sense of the world through reading, writing, listening, speaking. If we did that with
Yes.
each other a lot more, maybe we wouldn't just be in our
100%.
little quiet corners, not understanding anybody else. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love what you said about how, like, kind of mirroring how we introduce faith scripture with the same way, because I do think that our religion does ask us to prioritize education. And there are so many hadith, I feel like, that talk about the wisdom and
Hmm.
the value of being scholarly. So I love that you mentioned that because I think
Amazing.
we need to value reading and education and literacy just as much as we value taking our kids to the mosque and taking them to teach them Islam because it
Hmm.
is such an important thing that goes hand in hand with faith.
Hmm. And I think if we lived our faith, whichever faith we followed, truly in the spirit of how our Creator wanted us to, actually, faith would heal the world, and not have religion be
Absolutely.
used against each other. So,
Absolutely.
what's next? What book are you working on now? As we wrap it up, this has been such a great conversation. It's already been,
Yes.
it's over 30 minutes, and I know we have to wrap it up, but I want us to talk offline. And certainly, I want to promote your books in every way. So if you would make sure that Usama has your website and ways to order your books, we will
Absolutely.
make sure that when we share this, it's on our podcast description everywhere. And then tell us what you're working on next as we wrap up.
Yes. Absolutely. So I have more Amina bananas coming. You guys can see one and two are out now. Number three is coming out in January of 2026, and book number four is coming out in May 2026.
Mhm.
I'm working on book five and six right now with my publisher as well. And I also have next fall another novel in verse, so similar to Getting Between in size and in format, but it's called Sisters Alone, and it's about two young Muslim girls who get stuck home alone in a blizzard, and they also have to navigate their relationship and a little bit of struggles and survive. So it's a survival story. So it's another fast-paced one, but also in verse, very much lyrical and emotional and heartfelt.
Powerful. Shifa
Thank you.
Safadi, thank you so much for joining us at the Civic Pulse.
Thank you.
And I again look forward to reading more of the books, and I will get them in 2026 as the new ones come out. And I hope that our listeners and reader and viewers do as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to our viewers and our listeners for joining us this day on the Civic Pulse podcast. I want to thank our producers, Usama Razvi and Subhan Ashrafi, and the Civic Pulse podcast team for helping us put this on every single month. Talk to you soon.